Hi everyone, I'm Amanda Kendle from the Thoughtful Travel podcast, and this is a presentation series on how to be a better traveller for the City of Joondalup libraries. As COVID-19 travel restrictions start to lift, it's a great time to think about how to travel more thoughtfully, and this series will help you do just that.
This presentation is about how to be a slow traveller, and it includes tips and stories to help you do that.
You might be wondering, what is this thing we're calling slow travel? To start off with, I thought I'd give you a few definitions because there's no one exact way to describe slow travel. For some people it's a mindset, for some people it is really about being slow and deliberate, but I think that these definitions will give you some ideas of how you might become a slow traveller. So this one's from the Macmillan Dictionary, and they describe slow travel as travelling long distances over land and sea rather than by plane, especially because you're concerned about the environment or because you want to spend time enjoying the journey. So that's a fairly literal definition, but one that definitely is part of being a slow traveller. The Urban Dictionary says slow travel is a type of travel where a traveller spends a long period of time in one place, whereby they grow a stronger sociological and qualitative experience by getting to better know a certain location and its inhabitants. This is opposed to general travel, work travel, or holidaying or vacationing. So I quite like this idea of getting to know a location and its inhabitants, the local people, better. For me, that's a really important part of slow travel. And there's this definition as well from theartofslowtravel.com, and they say slow travel is a mindset that rejects traditional ideas of tourism and encourages you to soak in your environments and keep yourself open to new experiences. So I think all of these sum up pretty well what slow travel means to me. But if you want to be more of a slow traveller, well, what can you do? I've put together a few ideas of how to be a slow traveller with some examples to show you. One way you can be a slow traveller is to spend a longer time in fewer destinations. It's hard to get used to at first because often we're trying to cram as much in as possible, but I really recommend trying it out and seeing how you feel. Here's some examples from my own slower travels. Last year, I took my then 9-year-old son to Denmark, to Copenhagen. Now, once we knew we were going to Copenhagen, we started to look on the map and think, oh, we could go and spend some time in Sweden, and we could go down to Hamburg in Germany and see this other museum, and we could do this and this and this. It was really tempting, but I knew that we enjoy our trips more when we spend a longer time in fewer places, and so I did. And we had time to really look around. So you can see on some of these pictures from our Copenhagen trip, we really got to know what it was, a little bit of what it was like, what it's like to live in Copenhagen properly. So we could play soccer in the backyard of the apartment where we rented. We could ride our bikes everywhere, and we could see how other people lived. For example, the bike with the kind of, the big trailer on the front of the bike so they could do all their shopping or put their kids in it. And we also had plenty of time to actually look around parts of Copenhagen and nearby. So these pictures are from the Louisiana Art Gallery, an amazing museum about an hour north of Copenhagen. But because we weren't in a rush and we had a good chunk of time in Copenhagen, we could spend the whole day here. It meant my son could enjoy the amazing parts of the children's house with all these incredible activities, rather than rushing through because we had to get somewhere else. Another way you can be a slow traveller is to challenge the idea of the bucket list, or especially the ticking off of sightseeing spots way of travelling. The kind where you think, I must see the Eiffel Tower and the Arc de Triomphe, and I must see, Big Ben and the Tower of London and tick, 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 just because they're famous and you've heard of them. Instead, try and go for some experiential travel. For example, in Japan a couple of years ago, rather than racing around to hit all the main cities, we didn't even go to Tokyo at all. I focused on some of the experiences that are really a part of Japan. So as you can see, we made sure we got to ride a Shinkansen or bullet train, and we got to enjoy a lot of the food. So here is us eating some amazing ramen in Kyoto. Similarly, if you're going to go to the famous spots, like here we are at Fushimi Inari, a famous temple in Kyoto, try and time it so that you're not with all of the crowds and you'll feel a bit slower about it. So we went early in the morning on a fairly overcast day, and as you can see by the picture on the right especially, there was plenty of moments when we weren't in a crowd, and that makes it a whole lot more enjoyable as well. So that's one of the big bonuses of slow travel. Of course, there are going to be times when you really do want to see one of those important sightseeing spots. Here we are in Cambodia visiting Angkor Wat. And yeah, there's a bit of a crowd there because everyone wants to see Angkor Wat at sunrise. But I decided we really did too. So I think the point is, if you want to go to those really famous places, do it mindfully. Do it because you know you really want to go there. See if you can find a better way to do it at a bit better time of year or a better time of day. And just know that it's something you're going to do because you really want to see it for some reasons, not just because it's what everyone does. The other way you can be a slow traveller is to make sure you include some unplanned time for some spontaneous exploration. I try and schedule only maybe half of the time with vague plans even when I'm travelling, and make sure that there's lots of times to just do what appeals to us at the time. So, for example, last year I was in Cairns for a conference, and I always make sure, even if I'm travelling for work, to add some extra time. And I had an extra day on the end of my trip where I knew I would have seen a fair bit of Cairns and surrounds already, but I just wanted a day to wander. And you can see what I wandered to. I wandered to some markets, the Rusty's markets. I had an amazing almond croissant because by this time I'd been asking around some locals and figured out what was the tastiest thing I could find there. And I could stroll along the foreshore and see everyone swimming there as well. And those are the kind of things that you often don't get to see if you're rushing around only trying to hit all of the main sites. Another example is quite a few years ago in Vienna. I was travelling with my son who was younger then, and he had an obsession with rubbish trucks. Now, I was actually trying to take him to see Stephansdom, a really beautiful and famous cathedral in the middle of Vienna. And we nearly got to it. We came up out of the metro and we should have turned left. I could see the cathedral just nearby, but he heard a rubbish truck and he's like, let's follow it. And so instead of going to Stephansdom, to the cathedral, we wound our way through some of the side streets of Vienna following the rubbish truck. And, you know, it's kind of a crazy way to travel, but it was a really lovely way to see some of Vienna. And that's a different kind of travel, I think more memorable, certainly more enjoyable for my son as well. And that's the benefits of some of the ideas of slow travel. But don't just listen to me. I've got some other voices here to talk about slow travel. These are some words from some travel friends of mine around the world and what they think about slow travel.
What I love most about the hiking, I think, is that it's sort of the definition of slow travel, right? I mean, you can hardly go slower than that. And so to me, that's where it's also the most beautiful, because you have the time to see all those details. You know, you have to watch what's in front of your feet, and of course sometimes you should remember to look up and, you know, take it all in. Yeah. But you can see all these details, like all the animal tracks that we saw in the desert. And, you know, I would always make up those stories in my mind, who chased whom, and, you know, then there's a bird, you can see a bird landing, like the footprints of the bird, and the tracks of that lizard suddenly stop and disappear, so apparently it's been eaten. And, you know, if you were riding a quad or a motorbike through there, you wouldn't see any of that. And, you know, walking is actually a nice speed to take in all these details and, you know, I don't know, look at the flowers and see the animals, and because you're also hardly making any noise, as long as you're not talking too loudly, you know, you can actually see wildlife here and there. On my first trip to Morocco, I actually saw desert foxes when I was just, but that was when I was just hiking, like just going for a walk with two of the crew to get some water or something, and we had just one camel with us. We came over the top of a dune, and on the top of the next one there were two desert foxes, and you know, both of the guys just turned around and pointed to show me, and I had already seen them, and that was so exciting.
Oh, that's awesome.
And I think, you know, traveling any other way, that wouldn't have happened.
Well, one of the things that was helpful for me traveling as a kid was to learn how to slow down.
Yes.
You know, I was the type of, you know, when I was a solo traveler, I was one of those. It's like, you know, I get, you know, pretty basic hotel room because I'm going to spend pretty much no time there except sleeping, because I'm going to be out and about all day, and I'm going to see absolutely everything I possibly can squeeze into this short vacation time that I have, and, you know, just go, 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 go. And I saw a ton, but, you know, by the time you leave, you're just kind of wore out. And traveling with a child, you have to do a different pace, and you have to allow more time to have chill time where they're just, you know, going to relax at the hotel, or you're just going to, you know, do a shorter walk, or, you know, find a closer place to eat or whatever.
You know, this whole concept of slow travel, which I could probably talk about ad nauseum. But, you know, I was just reading something the other day, and it sort of, this, I don't know, frustration built up inside of me. Somebody had written, oh, yeah, well, you know, how to do Prague in a day. And I thought to myself, how do we do a city? Like, how do you do Rome in an afternoon? Like, it's just such an abomination to even imagine it.
And why? And why would you want to?
But, you know, I think people want to because they want to go home and say, well, I went to Rome, I went to Prague, I saw Florence, I would do it, and they want to just list off place names.
It's awful.
And I think that's the unfortunate part. And of course, you know, you got to be in Japan for 2 years, and, you know, I got to go traveling for a couple of years just recently. And so, you know, we had that privilege, or at least we built it into our lives, to have a very different travel experience. And of course, for lots of people, certainly in North America, you start on 2 weeks vacation a year.
Yes.
So you're just like hoofing it. And if you're going to go off to Europe, well, already there's a day there and a day back, and
you've really only got a couple of days. You've got to do,
exactly.
You do have to do Prague in a day. Yeah.
That's right. I know. So, and I don't think people would go, let's just go to Prague for 2 weeks. You know what I mean? They just wouldn't do that, right?
Yeah.
Except, of course, then you'd really get to understand a lot more about a place.
It's the opposite to how my husband and I travelled when we first started exploring the world. We did the very typical early 20s thing of hitting Europe for 8 weeks and seeing as much as possible, you know, and it was like, what day is it? Oh, this must be Amsterdam then. How many churches have we seen? What church? I don't know. What's this? I have no idea. You know,
just take a picture. We'll figure it out later.
Exactly, you know, and don't get me wrong, it was amazing, and we saw so much that we wouldn't have been able to see. We didn't have the money, we didn't have the time, or the, you know, the experience or anything to go deep into places like that. We were very much on the backpacker trail, and it was so much fun. It was an incredible time. But the older we got, and the more, I think it's also the more we understood what we like about travel and the places that we go, we really prefer to go deep into one place rather than shallow into a number of places. So we, just for example, would spend a month in Canada, and we base ourselves in one town for almost that entire month. And we get an apartment where like a proper apartment where we can cook all our own meals and unpack our bags and live there, you know, and really, really feel like we live there. And what we discovered after doing that once was that we get to know a place in a completely different way. I'm not saying it's necessarily better or worse than traveling through a big area in a shorter period of time, but I think you just get to know a place in a different way. You know, I do things like go to the library if we stay in a place for a while. Like, I love going to local libraries and just... Me too. Yeah. Just, you know, eye-opening. It is. You really get a much better sense of the community and the people who live there and the vibe of the place just by sitting around people who live there, you know, and having conversations at a coffee shop and going back to the same coffee shop a few times. And I mean, to me, it doesn't have to be spending a month in a place. You can you can travel like that over a weekend. I think it's just more a willingness to give up covering a lot of ground in order to go deeper into a place and explore 1 or 2 things rather than 10.
Have a think about ways you could be a slow traveller on your next trip. It's a normal feeling to want to make the most of it when we travel, but perhaps your making the most of it could look different now. I know I'm looking forward to some slow travel trips in Western Australia in the next few months. I just can't wait. So happy travels and thanks for watching.